Howdy, 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 and most importantly, howdy. Howdy, folks. Kanaju here. Yes, it's me, Kanaju. I know it's been a month since my last upload, jeez, but I'm here now. And I hope you're ready for my magnum opus, because I've been working on this video on and off since mid-January. I kid you not. This is part 2 of my Beyond the Algorithm video, published January 16th. As I'm recording this new intro, it is now May 16th. I could explain what took me so long, but that would make this incredibly long video even longer, so let's not do that. Miraculously, everything past this intro is the original audio from January. Somehow, this video script survived 2 No Man's Sky update cycles without needing to be revised at all. Lucky me, right? So let's get into it before the next update drops. How about that? I'm Kanaju, and this is how I would fix planetary variety in No Man's Sky. Now, let me begin by saying that the title is a slight clickbait. I don't think planetary exploration or variety is actually broken. Fix is just a good word for a title, right? In reality, these are my ideas for potentially improving planetary variety. For those who missed my Beyond the Algorithm video, I highly recommend watching it either before or after this one. I tried to quantify the variety of No Man's Sky's planet generation by exploring combinations of variables and how they're distributed over playtime. It's a fun watch if I do say so myself. And I do. I originally planned to end the video with the section about my suggestions for improving variety, but that actually ballooned into this monster of a video. So here we are, 4 months later. Before I begin with my ideas, I want to be clear that I think Hello Games are an exceedingly talented group of developers, and I'm not just saying that because they let me collaborate with them for the Orbital update. I have decades of amateur game design experience and almost a decade of No Man's Sky playing gameplay experience, but I don't pretend to know the game engine, the team's design goals, or their craft better than they do. I also don't know how many resources they have assigned to No Man's Sky at this point versus Light No Fire, which is their upcoming fantasy game. So if I present an idea in this video that seems like a no-brainer, it's important to remember that Hello Games have spent years working on No Man's Sky, and they've taken in millions of suggestions. Chances are they've already considered most of the stuff on this list at one point or another. So let's get to the main content then. The actual list begins at this time code. However, I recommend sticking around for the explanation before that. It'll help the whole video make more sense. Fair warning, I might bring up my birthday or turning 30 a few times throughout the video. This was supposed to premiere the week following my birthday, but it didn't. So if past me tries to guilt you into liking the video or subscribing for my birthday, be a dear and humor him. He doesn't know you aren't watching this in January. Cool? Cool. Thank you. Take it away, past me. So, when I say variety and improving variety, what does that actually mean? Well, firstly, I'm only covering planetary variety in this video. It's long enough, I might cover space another time. So when folks talk about No Man's Sky's planet variety, they're often talking about visual variety. All planets look the same, or this planet looked crazy, things like that. And that makes sense. No Man's Sky is a video game, right? It takes place on a video screen. We interact through visuals. However, there are many different forms of variation that I think the game needs to leverage in order to meaningfully increase variety. I've narrowed them down to 4 categories. Firstly, there's aesthetic, cosmetic, or visual variety. This is how varied each planet looks. Then there's gameplay variety, or interactive variety. This refers to what the player actually does on each planet, the gameplay. There's reward variety, which refers to what the player receives or can collect from each planet. And lastly, there's combo variety, which you could also call technical variety or just variety in general. But basically, this is the number of combinations that can occur between different planet options. So, for example, there's very low combo variety in blizzards, right? Blizzards only occur on ice planets. Whereas there's a high amount of combo variety with gravity storms because they can occur on almost any type of biome. So that's how I define combo variety. By identifying how successful the game is in each of these 4 areas, we can more effectively evaluate how effective an idea might be at actually improving the game. For example, one solution I've seen suggested for literal years to improve quote-unquote variety is just to add more procedural assets, aka, the little pieces the game uses to build trees, animals, and everything else. So instead of 10 trees or however many we have now, we should have 1,000 trees, 1,000 cactus parts to choose from, 1,000 animal parts. That way we'll almost never see the same combination of parts, and every planet will look unique. And that's great and all, but I don't actually think that's where No Man's Sky actually needs to improve. Let me show you what I mean. Here's my artistic interpretation of a lush planet from No Man's Sky. Artistic might be a stretch. Damn it, Jim, I'm a designer, not an illustrator. But it's a lush planet. Here's another lush planet, also based on the game. And another. But you've seen these before, so let's add in some of that visual variety folks are asking for. Boom. These are completely new trees and plants and everything. Completely unique planet. Here's another new one. And another. Such variety. Wow. Okay, now I'm going to start repeating them in the background while I talk so I don't have to make any more because those were very time consuming to make. So, despite all of these being completely different planets with different plants and colors and everything, if you've played a lot of No Man's Sky, you already know how they're going to play. You know you'll shoot the big plant and it'll turn into carbon. The weather will make your screen more opaque and drain your hazard protection. And of course, you already know what all the common resources look like. You have your sodium flowers and your dihydrogen crystals. You could design 1,000 different planets like these, but besides the initial wow factor when you land, most longtime players know there isn't much reason to look around. Sure, they all look different, but mechanically they're all quite similar. And that's where I think No Man's Sky really needs to improve. If you watched my previous video on quantifying the game's variety, you'll know we already have millions of unique, planet visuals. So how do we make each planet feel more unique to explore without just regenerating the whole universe? I'm glad you asked. As previously stated, Hello Games have received millions of suggestions over the last decade about what should be added to the game. I usually stop myself from speculating because I don't want to spend all my time thinking about what a game could be when I could just be enjoying what it is. But sometimes, I do let myself dream. Just a little. Even in my dreams, though, I always try to maintain a sense of practicality. After all, why dream about something impossible when you could dream of something achievable? And so, today, I'm excited to share with you a list of 21 ideas, 21 categories of ideas, ranging in viability from I could probably mod that in to Kanaju, calm down. In fact, I'll be listing them from the easiest to implement, theoretically, to the most difficult, theoretically. There may be spikes here or there in difficulty, but in general, that's the plan. Again, while I do have my fair share of amateur game dev experience, I would never pretend to know more about No Man's Sky's development than the folks working on it. And just because I make something sound easy, which I probably will, well, that doesn't mean it would actually be easy to implement. I promise nothing is as simple as it sounds. Last thing before I get into it, here's a quick statement unambiguously granting Hello Games free license to use anything they see in this video, or any of my videos, of course, without the need for attribution or compensation. It's all yours. I'm not in a position to make good on any of these ideas, so feel free to use them, Hello Games. And if anyone from Hello Games is actually watching this, howdy, love the game. Please don't hate me for this list. Love you. Okay, here we go. Time to begin. So again, we're starting with what I think would be the simplest to implement and working our way up in difficulty. So, number 1, let's increase some of the color variety. While No Man's Sky is full of colorful planets, there are certain parts of the game that still have really limited palettes. For example, every planet has a blue tint at night, regardless of what color the sky above is. I'd love to see some planets implement some different nighttime hues related to the nebulas above. Some might look garish though, so you probably need to be subtle about how it's implemented. Right now though, every planet looks very similar at night. Imagine if some were slightly brighter or darker than others at night. That could be interesting for exploration. Plus, I think visually it would just help immerse you more in the system you're exploring, if it felt like it was being lit by the nebulas around you. This shift to blue is especially jarring when you're in like a red ocean and then it becomes a blue ocean at night. You would think it would still be red, right? Speaking of oceans, I would love to see more options for ocean color. Have you ever seen a purple ocean before? A pink one? A yellow one? Okay, well, a yellow one would look like piss, but still, there should be at least one piss ocean in the universe. And this is one area where I'm pretty sure the team did test more colors and probably found that like brown and yellow looked ugly 90% of the time and decided to cut them. If that's the case, fair enough. Purple though, you would think that would work for an ocean. Other than that though, I'd love to see more variety in the colors of sunset. Most sunsets look similar to what we'd see on Earth, despite the colors of stars and atmospheres being much different in No Man's Sky. Now, I'm not smart enough to understand atmospherics at an astronomical level, but the way I see it, Earth has blue skies and orange sunsets, and Mars has orange skies and blue sunsets. So, all I'm saying is I wouldn't mind a bluer sunset every now and again in No Man's Sky. More color options would increase both visual and combo varieties. I'll add each suggestion to this board to help us understand how each could impact the exploration experience. Number 2. Gravity. Let's vary gravity a bit more. In a previous video I mentioned that there's no reason every low gravity planet needs to be low atmosphere as well, and a bunch of folks commented on my video telling me why that actually does make sense. Listen, I hear y'all, but also, the moon with the thickest atmosphere in our solar system is Titan. Its gravity is like 14% that of Earth's. It's less than our moon's gravity, yet it has thick clouds and weather and bodies of liquid on its surface. Sure, it's methane, not water, but that's due to its extreme cold. Back to No Man's Sky though, I think moons should have lower gravity than planets in general. And I would love to visit a planet with stronger gravity too, like very rarely. Imagine if launch fuel cost varied by gravitational pull. You could even have fauna on lower gravity planets be larger, and fauna on high gravity planets be smaller. But that's a whole nother thing. Even just varying the gravity for the player would be great. Previously, I would have assumed that low gravity was only used on dead worlds because, they didn't have to account for flora or fauna. It seemed like a technical limitation. However, last year they added gravity storms to a bunch of traditional planets with flora and fauna, and that seemed to work alright, so I imagine it wouldn't be too difficult to come up with a scheme to set a planet's gravity regardless of biome. But again though, that might just be my ignorance. So mixing up gravity would impact both interactive and combo variety. After all, navigating a low gravity planet or moon would feel a lot different than a regular one, probably. And since it's independent of biome, you'd likely still be finding new gravity biome combos hundreds of hours into the game, which is cool. Number 3. More atmospheric effects. Not to be confused with weather effects, which I will get to later. Atmospheric effects in this case refers to the skies above. Auroras are an incredible phenomenon that occur near the magnetic poles of planets in our solar system. Jupiter has them, Saturn has them, Earth has them, and they're stunning. I would love if planets in No Man's Sky could have procedural auras of their own. I mean, look at these things. They're so beautiful, and you would need them on every planet, of course. Funny enough, I didn't get this idea from real life, like you would expect. Ratchet & Clank: A Crack in Time also has some seamless space exploration, and some of the moons in that game from 2009 have auroras that are visible from both space and from the ground. They're just flat animated textures, but they're so effective. It's one of those things that's always stuck with me. Funny enough, No Man's Sky has something like pseudo-auroras on these exotic pillar planets already, so I'd love to see more atmospheric effects like that elsewhere. Besides auroras, shooting stars or meteor showers would also be cool to see. Yes, we do have meteor showers in the game already, and I love those, but I'm talking about the fast, blink-and-you-miss-it shooting stars that we usually get on Earth. Don't get me wrong, I love the physical meteors already in the game, but having some that burn up quickly before reaching the ground would offer more variety and help the interactive ones stand out more. You could even limit them to planets with atmospheres, since that's how burning up in the atmosphere works. I recently witnessed an annular eclipse, and a total eclipse is on its way to San Antonio soon. I'd love if eclipses were a thing in No Man's Sky. It might be a pain to code, it might even occur too frequently due to the close proximity of planets in No Man's Sky. Thinking about it, I imagine a lot of moons would be quite dark about half the time. Still, it would make the universe feel more dynamic. I know large ships can eclipse the sun sometimes in games, so I can't help but wonder if planetary eclipses would work too. Lastly, more cloud types. Here are some crazy cloud types on Earth that I think would be cool. I don't know if they could, you would think they could modify noise generation the same way they do for terrain. I'd love to see the patterns like this, like very rarely on some worlds. It wouldn't really affect anything, obviously, it would just be cool to see. Kind of like the geometric terrain anomalies, right? It just makes a world feel more alien. So, more atmospheric effects would improve visual and combination variety. As you'll see, the early items on this list deal mostly with cosmetic variety and visual combinations, while the later stuff deals with more mechanical elements. So, let's keep going. Number 4. Varying common resources. This is a big one. Let's look at those illustrations I made earlier again. As we flip through them, the most noticeable repeating element, besides the consistent scale and distribution of flora, which I cover in another video, are the common resources. Anyone who's played No Man's Sky knows that these are some of the most predictable elements of every world. Every planet has yellow sodium flowers, every world has red oxygen plants, and blue deuterium-rich plants. You'll always find blue dihydrogen crystals scattered across the ground. You'll always see the same red condensed carbon crystals. And for goodness sake, they all glow. I've actually theorized for a while that a large part of why folks feel like planets are less varied than they used to be is due to the prevalence of these objects. After all, these objects are designed to call your attention. They're bright and colorful, and they always stand out. From a gameplay perspective, it makes complete sense. These are resources that every player will need at some point, and they should be easy to identify in a pinch, even if you've never visited a planet or you're new to the game. From an immersive standpoint, though, they feel just a little bit too gamey. I think the color coding makes sense, that's fine with me, but why are the exact same flowers and crystals on literally every planet and moon in the universe? I think if you want to make planets feel less predictable, you have to mix these up. Allow me to share some of my ideas. We have flowers, which are good, but we could also have plants with stalks, like corn or something. We could have them be fruits, like watermelon growing on the ground. Or maybe it's just some alien ooze. I could even see these being minerals or crystals on some planets. That would make more sense for airless worlds than flowers, I think. Maybe they're floating plants on one world, or fungal growths on another. If you wanted to go crazy, you could create a series of fruit models, and then give each flora model, a set of anchor points, which these fruits would attach to. And then on certain planets, you would have fruit trees, right? Or fruit cacti, or fruit mushrooms, or whatever. Imagine if you had to pick oxygen off a tree instead of a flower. Sure, mechanically it's the same button press, but it would feel like a different action. What about tree sap containing sodium? Specific biomes could also have unique options, right? Like frozen worlds could have oxygen encased in ice that you'd have to break first. Bubble worlds could have glowing bubbles that contain the resources and float near the ground. Hexagon worlds, of course, would have those little floating hexagons. Things like mushrooms, they wouldn't have to be exclusive to toxic worlds. In fact, I'd recommend against it, but they could be more likely on toxic worlds. It'd be a simpler approach for crystal resources. So just give us some different crystal models in that case. Maybe condensed carbon could be like petrified wood on some planets, tree stumps or something. There are a lot of different types of crystals in the world we could draw from, and I would love to see them in No Man's Sky. Now, if you wanted to go crazy, this is what I'm talking about, spiking difficulty, you could do living resources, like those living minerals. Imagine having to catch some sodium while a storm drains your hazard protection on permadeath. Now that would be an adventure, or a funny story. So this falls into visual and combo variety categories for sure. Depending on your interpretation, it could also fall into interactive variety, since we're trying to vary these common interactions. Up to you on that one, but I'll take the box. Okay, So, I spent too long on that one. Let's do an easy one. Number 5. Burying knowledge stones. Again, every single planet in the whole universe has the same dang knowledge stones. No, I want variety. According to the No Man's Sky wiki, here's some of the monoliths you can expect to find in your travels. Yet only a single design for knowledge stones. I would vary their silhouettes a little, but keep the same sort of face on all of them. It should be easy to identify them as a knowledge stone, but cool to find a new design you've never seen before. They would probably make great subjects for virtual photography too. Now, it would be cool if they could impart other knowledge as well, right? Knowledge stones. I know plaques have history and monoliths have visions, and these are meant to be much simpler, but it would be cool if like 1 in 20 gave you something different, like coordinates to an ancient site, or what if it taught you an atlas word instead of the main faction's language, just like 1 in 20. That'd be a nice little surprise. Also, I'd set the design of knowledge stones at a system level rather than by planet. So each system would have one set of knowledge stones. I think that would help give you a better sense that the local planets are connected to each other and unique from other systems in the universe. As of right now, there aren't really any other system-specific elements of the game that are consistent across all local planets, except for like the suns, the night skies, and the starship models. So I think it would add a whole new level to the procedural generation and immersion. I'll put in the visual and combo categories as well as the rewards category, since we might vary what you receive. The interaction itself wouldn't change though, so no take there. Number 6, add more plant interactions. Remember when I said we already know what it would be like to play all of these new planets we've never been to? Well, what if we didn't? What if regular plants could carry additional interactivity? For example, when I bump into a cactus, I should take some damage. I should. Walking through a field of cactus should be a dangerous idea. Certain plants could be poisonous, triggering your toxic protection if you get too close. Maybe these glowing things could emit radiation, right? They look radioactive. This plant looks like it's made of lava. Is it hot to the touch? Maybe harvesting certain trees could cause little creatures to fly out and attack you, a la the jellyfish underwater, or even the asteroids in space. That'd be kind of funny. Bees could attack you using that same principle when you attempt to harvest honey. Little things like that would go a long way to making different biomes feel different. And maybe not all cactus damage you, right? But it'd be cool if some of them did. This would improve interactive and combo variety, I think. Maybe not combo variety, as that would depend on your implementation, like adding toxic plants to other biomes. But if you did that, in that case, I would check this off. Alright, let's try something a little different here. Number 7. Wildcard Plants. I remember back in 2018 when No Man's Sky Next first released. The universe felt like it was full of possibilities. I picked up my first deuterium-rich plant and I went flying. It was the coolest thing, and I'm sure that most players had a similar experience the first time they found one of these. However, after that, I was disappointed to discover that not only were there no other status-affecting plants to pick, but that deuterium-rich plant is also ubiquitous across all worlds. I thought it was a cool discovery, but it soon became pedestrian. So, what if there were other flowers? Back in the day, there were flowers that could heal you or restore your shields, and today there are still kelp sacks underwater that refill your breathable air. So imagine for a second, you land on a planet, and instead of a blue glowing deuterium-rich plant, it's glowing purple or pink or something.
Editing Kanaju here. It is a pure coincidence that I found footage of a purple-pink flower with different abilities that is no longer in the game. What are the chances of that? Wow.
And it just has some procedural name, like, I don't know, Fluber flower. You can come up with that later. But the point is, it's procedurally generated, the appearance and the name, so you don't know what it does. This is a flower you've never seen before. Of course, you'll be able to recognize it's purple, so it's like a wild card, right? You pick it, and suddenly your health is restored. Awesome. So now you know that the glowing purple flowers on this planet are safe. You take off and land on another planet. You see another purple flower. You pick it, and instantly it drains your hazard protection, just like that. And now you're scrambling to refill it, and you know not to touch the purple flowers on this world. Right now in the game, eating food can give you a number of different status effects such as giving you a 15-second sprint overload, or restoring 20% life support, or a health point, or hazard protection, etc. Imagine if every planet had one wildcard flower that you'd have to test to know what it did, and it could pull from any of these effects at different strength levels. Maybe it's a free boost, maybe it's poison. It could restore health or damage you. It could refill life support or hazard protection, or drain them. Maybe it causes your screen to go like 90% opaque for 10 seconds, like temporary blindness. Maybe it distorts your vision by blowing out contrast temporarily. What if it spawned a biological horror or caused animals to attack you? You could go wild with effects. But the idea is that instead of having deuterium-rich plants on every single planet, we could have some random status effect plants instead. Then every planet would have at least one semi-unique interaction. That kind of sounds sad now that I say it out loud. But explorers would love it, since the act of testing your body's interaction with an alien plant is one of those great sci-fi tropes that we haven't really seen in the game yet. It could also lead to memorable scenarios or anecdotes. Imagine tricking your friend into eating a plant that you know will cause him to black out when he's in the middle of a fight. He'd hate you, but it'd be funny. And then if you combine this with the fruit and tree sap ideas from number 4, now every planet's starting to feel a bit more unique and maybe even worth exploring, right? You might find a tree with purple fruit that heal you, or some purple watermelons on the ground that just, very dangerous. Heck, you could even have 2 wildcard flowers per planet, right? One bluish and one pinkish, or find 2 colors that aren't being used elsewhere. And one could be rarer than the other, so you have a reason to look around. I don't know, I'm spitballing here. Anyways, this would fall into interactive, reward, and combo categories. It wouldn't really affect anything visually, since they'd use the same models as other common resources. Now, before we move on, quick break to say thanks to my valued members and my subscribers. Y'all are the best. Alright, number 8, varying resource distribution. Yeah, that sounds boring. While yes, I would love to see planets with less flora, or more, I'm actually just talking about resource deposits in this case. Back in the day, you used to be able to stumble upon treasure planets. These planets were just chock full of goodies to loot. I'd love to see the return of these in some form. It could be worlds with larger, more prominent deposits of valuable metals like gold or emerald, or it could be planets that are full of some other specific resource across the surface. Kind of like how gravitino balls can be found everywhere on high security planets. We'll replace the gravitino balls with ancient structures or some other rare resource or object, and that's pretty much what I'm suggesting. These planets should be like stupid rare too. Make them feel like actual treasure planets when you find them. High security makes sense, sure, but give us something better than gravitino balls, please. And this could actually impact all 4 categories if done right, since they would create new kind of interactive space and new resource economy in that system. The key would be picking the right resources to include. So let me know in the comments what you think would fit the bill. Number 9, carnivorous plants or hazardous plants. I have beef with carnivorous plants in the game. I hate that we have the same 3 types on
almost
every single world. We have the inflating gas bags, we have the Venus flytraps, and we have the whip vine things. Granted, those whip vine things have a fair amount of variety to them. Not too much, but it's something. While the other 2 look identical on every planet. And listen, I know some are slightly more yellow or more green or brown or whatever, but let's be real, they look the same. And part of that is just how they're animated. You know, if you're gonna do those animations, you can't change the design of it too much. And I do like the animations. But this is another instance of a common resource becoming way too prevalent and predictable on every planet, and thus removing the sense of discovery from landing on a new place. So let's see how we can switch up what we already have. First step, vary the colors more, especially when it comes to the gas bags. The green particle effects especially, they're distracting because they usually don't match the planet around them. They kind of break the aesthetic, so to speak. So I would adjust the hue to match the rest of the planet, much like how the leaves of all the plants around them adjust to fit the colors of the planet. That'll help it feel more native, I think. Next, I would vary the little bulbs that contain oxygen, those little red glowing ones. I like that you can run up to them and gather oxygen in a pinch. I think that's a fun little mini game. So maybe we vary the resource. It could give you sodium, dihydrogen, carbon, or hell, even something rare, right? Imagine if you found a planet where you could gather deuterium from hazardous plants. It could also be a local element, right? Like dioxide or paraffinium. Or I could even see them being a source of gas on some planets. Nitrogen, radon, sulfurine, that would make sense for a gas bag, right? Alternatively, imagine if the only glowing red oxygen plants on a planet were carnivorous ones. Those are your only source of oxygen. They'd have to show up as oxygen when you use your scanner instead of hazardous plants, which I think would be more fun than having them appear as dangerous on your scanner, because that way you could get tricked if you're just looking at your scanner. But yeah, I think that'd be a fun scenario to find yourself in. And perhaps if you pair these with wildcard fruit, which we talked about earlier, imagine that, a carnivorous plant that has purple buds, so you have to avoid it to get the benefit. Or maybe it won't be worth it at all, right? Talk about emergent gameplay. I'm not done though. The gas bags should be able to deal damage based on local hazards as well. For example, gas bags on a toxic planet could deal toxic damage, like the hazardous flora and caves do. They could deal radioactive damage, like the crates and crashed freighters. Or you could use boiling oil on hot planets to deal heat damage. Obviously not every planet would have something to match it, so it could just deal damage, but I think running into the special kinds of this plant on specific planets would be a cool little detail for those who notice. Also, wouldn't it be cool to find a grove of these ankle biters? Like just 20 of them in a big patch. We have big old patches of sodium and oxygen plants. I want a field of hazardous plants that just chews through your health if you're not paying attention. Because it'll look, with all those little red glowing bulbs, it would just look like a patch of oxygen plants. But, oh man, imagine imagine someone just getting shredded like a bunch of bear traps. I mean, that would be pretty awesome, wouldn't it? Lastly, and this is important, I want hazardous plants to attack and damage animals. I really do. Sean used to tell this anecdote about a bird getting killed by a hazardous plant in a pre-release build of the game. However, hazardous plants don't seem to damage fauna in the current game at all. It's weird, right? That you see them just casually walk through these plants and nothing happens, yet we're trying to avoid them constantly. And it's also weird that these plants would only attack travelers since we're not native to their ecosystems. Presumably, their defensive mechanisms are evolved to kill animals so that they can fertilize their roots and absorb the nutrients. So then they should kill animals, right? Imagine a space cow getting exploded by a gas bag. I mean, that would be a memorable moment. So this idea would hopefully enhance all four categories of variety. The variety of damage types and bulb rewards would be especially cool, I think. So now let's talk about one of my favorite gameplay loops in the game. Loot. Number 10, Archaeology. No Man's Sky actually has two main kinds of archaeological activities, buried ruins and buried loot. Let's talk about ruins. These used to be a lot more varied when they were first released in 2018. However, due to various bugs, the procedural top of this tower no longer spawns, and the rest of the ruins are always buried at the same depth. The chests and keys are always in the same spots as well. It's cool the first time you find one, but it gets boring quickly. It'd be great if the pieces could be shuffled around, even if it's the same pieces in every ruin. But it'd be even cooler if there were more parts to pull from, but honestly, any variation in layout would be welcome at this point. Perhaps they could also introduce some form of danger to make it more exciting. Maybe a small percentage of ruins are toxic or radioactive, regardless of biome, right? So you get close to it and your protection starts, going down. That could encourage you to hurry, and it could even inform some headcanon about what happened to the structure. Maybe some ruins are infested with hazardous plants. Perhaps there's a nest of biological horrors. I don't know, anything. I mean, the allure of archaeology is the chance to dig up something you've never seen before, but right now every ruin in the game is exactly the same. It's a good source of money, but it's currently so boring that I usually avoid it. So, rewards-wise, ruins actually have some of the best variety of any activity in the game. The procedural treasure has tons of different categories, and value can vary wildly. With the addition of most valuable loot added to the Wonders catalog, it's a pretty good loot game. That said, what if there was a low chance of digging up an ancient staff part that you could use to make your own multi-tool? As of right now, you can only acquire staff parts from autophage activities. feel like ancient ruins would be a great way to expand that loop. Imagine special staff parts only available in buried chests. That would make these ruins more enticing to endgame players who no longer need to earn money. And if someone finds one prior to unlocking the multi-tool staff content, it could still have a high value attached to it so they can sell it if they like. It's a win-win. Or maybe we can throw in some kind of ancient tech for your multi-tool or exosuit. It could have some unique effect as opposed to a generic stat boost. Like maybe it's cursed, right? A cursed module. And it boosts one stat significantly at the cost of another. Loot like that would make archaeology more appealing for the endgame. Though again, you would need to make ruins a lot more engaging for gameplay in order to support that new loot. The other kind of archaeology is buried loot. Ancient bones and salvageable scrap can currently be found buried on select planets. These give us another way to earn money and encourage players to explore a planet on foot or via exocraft. I think these are almost perfect, as is. I mean, they have color-coded rarity and value, which is awesome. I do wish you could find these things underwater too, though. After all, if satellites crashed across the surface of a planet, at least a few would have landed in rivers and oceans, right? Again, it only serves to encourage underwater exploration. Bones could also be buried under the oceans. You could even use different models for aquatic bones if you wanted to go crazy, whatever you like. I like these gameplay loops so much that I just wish we had more. Hear me out, right? Buried meteorites with rare minerals inside. Or maybe crashed starships. I know we have the point of interest crashed starships that you can repair or there will be an NPC, but I'm talking like destroyed starships, just like crumbled up metal. And these would be beyond repair, but contain salvageable parts. You could even copy the gameplay from the downed satellites, clearing away broken shells to get the good stuff. I don't know, y'all let me know in the comments what kind of scattered loot you'd like to see. Overall, these changes could affect all 4 categories of variety as well. Number 11, underwater points of interest. No Man's Sky currently has 5 types of underwater points of interest. Sunken save points, sunken ruins, sunken buildings, sunken starships, and sunken freighters. And while that's actually pretty good, 2 of those are not varied enough in my opinion. Firstly, sunken freighters are not procedural. They're all the original model from Atlas Rises. We got procedural crashed freighters on the surface of planets back in 2018, and I'd love to see that same treatment applied to the underwater versions. The underwater buildings are also pretty static. Giving them a couple more layouts, similar to buildings on land, would be cool to see. Sunken ruins are pretty well varied, but the problem is they always spawn with 3 treasure chests, but only 1 key. So perhaps maybe a second key could be hidden somewhere in the ruins, procedurally, under these stairs or in a tower or something like that. That would be neat. Other than that, like I said before, I'd like to see more underwater archaeology, sunken bones, sunken salvage, sunken starship wreckage, or maybe even the occasional cargo pod like fallen from a freighter. Happening upon a sunken ship is like a classic adventure trope that I'm sure folks would love to see more of. For the main fixes though, we're improving visual and combo variety. Alright, we've made it about halfway through the list. My voice is going out. If you're enjoying it so far, please consider liking the video and subscribing. Doing so lets me know that I've still got it, even though I'm now 30. Anyways, back to the list. Number 12, material effects. I can already hear you. Ooh, so exciting. Yeah, I know. Back in 2021, the Prisms update overhauled rain effects. Besides giving raindrops refractions, it also made everything appear wet following a downpour. Your exosuit, your ship, the landscape around you would appear shinier to indicate that there was water on the surface, right? And I think that's great. But now I want more. After a dust storm, it'd be cool if my exosuit looked dusty. After a blizzard, maybe I could have ice or snow on my ship. There could be a layer of ash after a firestorm. Certain storms, like radioactive storms, might not have any noticeable material effect, but the other storms could be cool to see. And I think it would, again, help those planets feel more separate. It would feel like a dust storm is different than a radioactive storm because it visually would leave behind a different trace. I'm putting this strictly in the visual category, since it wouldn't affect much else. It wouldn't improve combo variety since each effect would be tied to a specific kind of weather too. Alright, number 13, mountain biomes. Did you know that these brown or gray barren areas on planets are actually separate biomes or ecosystems? They're referred to as mountain biomes in the files, though they can occur at any altitude. Now, I don't mind these being barren, but I do mind them being boring. Not individually, of course. I like barren areas of planets. However, they're boring because they're practically the same on every planet. There are only two types of biome that fill these areas, and they look pretty much the same. I'd like to introduce some assets from the rocky biomes into these areas. I think having some planets with a mix of rocky, boulder-filled areas between forests of mushrooms or whatever would be a cool thing to see. Could we use these hooks for other more ambitious biome combinations? Maybe, but I'm trying to keep it relatively simple for this video. Rocky biomes could fit with practically any existing biome, which is why I think they'd work here. Other biomes might clash and require more work to program. The only other biomes that might work in these places might be infested biomes that use only the small plants, or a version of the mountain biomes that have like Atlantideum crystals. Either of these would be cool, as they'd create planets that are sort of in the process of being corrupted. Make those combos super duper rare, and you have a recipe for discovery. Let's see, these suggestions would improve visual and combo variety. Maybe gameplay, maybe interactive variety a little bit, because you get in. I guess they could, if you put the Atlantideum, that would also change reward variety. Golly. Okay, potentially all four. Potentially. Number 14, more weather effects. Believe it or not, storms are one of my least favorite parts of the game. Believe it or not, of course you believe it. Not just because they're annoying, but because they're boring. They cover your screen, they make a lot of noise, and they drain hazard support. All of them do. And sure, different storms drain different meters, but the only real difference between a blizzard and a radioactive supercell is the color of the bar and the effects on screen. And that's kind of lame. I want storms to be a bit more unpredictable. That scene in Interstellar when they realize those mountains aren't mountains is one of my favorite sci-fi scenarios of all time. Rogue waves are a familiar phenomenon, but space waves are something else entirely. So how can we make storms space storms, you know? How do we make it more interesting for exploration? Well, I have a few ideas. Okay, so fair warning, we're officially crossing over from, yeah, that seems reasonable territory into, dang man, slow down territory with this one. So let me frame this properly. 2020's Origins update, The Legend, stated this in its patch notes, quote, "During storms, the exosuit can now take advantage of the extreme conditions. Superheated temperatures can be processed into improved jetpack efficiency. Freezing temperatures prevent mining beam overheating. High radioactivity increases mining yield. Dense toxic gases can be recirculated for additional stamina." That's cool, so exploring each of these different biomes feels different, right? Well, unfortunately, those effects aren't very pronounced. The two mining effects would rarely apply to endgame players who really don't need to mine anything, much less in the middle of a storm.
Plus, these effects are not very intuitive. You would not necessarily expect your jetpack to work better while on fire, as helpful as that effect is.
So let's come up with some other ways we could make weather interactive. Storm crystals are a cool mechanic introduced in the Visions update. Basically, it's this very valuable resource that you can only harvest during extreme storms. So instead of seeking shelter during a storm, you're encouraged to run out and collect as many of these as you can. I think it's a great activity. It mixes up gameplay and gives you unique rewards for engaging with weather. Lightning can kill animals. Meteors can leave minerals at their crash site. Tornadoes can pick you up and haul your alien buddies and toss you all over a mountain. These mechanics are great. They take weather from a background phenomenon or an ambient effect to the forefront of gameplay. They make weather, fun. So let's take some of their solutions and expand on them. Let's take the storm crystal idea in another direction. What if there were flowers that only bloomed when it rains? They could bloom for radioactive storms or fire or whatever you like. Even if they didn't offer any rewards, which maybe some of them do, just seeing the environment react to storms would be great. Plants could catch fire like torches during a firestorm, or maybe plants struck by lightning could catch fire. Fauna should interact with weather as well, right? Maybe they run for cover during a large storm. They could run to the nearest large flora. Or maybe they run into a cave or something. Or what if certain fauna became powered up during storms? You know, like how Godzilla's spikes glow when he's powered up by radiation. Imagine if there was a predator that did the same thing, glowing eyes or something. I would love if storms had more tangible effects that we could actually interact with. For example, extreme radiation in real life tends to interfere with the electronics, right? So what if sentinels were weakened during radioactive storms? You could have little spark effects, right, to show the player that they're being affected. Or what if you couldn't call your ship during a radioactive storm specifically? Or what if your HUD flickered on and off for a second? That would make radioactive storms feel dangerous in completely new ways, while advantageous in other ways. Blizzards. What if your ship became covered in ice during a blizzard, and you'd have to melt it to get in? It'd be a simple ice block model or something that you hit with your mining beam, and it breaks, but it would communicate that this is indeed an ice storm and not just a white dust storm. Currently, speaking of, dust storms only affect visibility, with the hotter ones draining heat protection. I actually think that's okay. Maybe it could also make it easier to evade sentinels, right? Or maybe the sand blocks some kind of remote access, so maybe summoning ships or freighters is impossible during a heavy sandstorm. But honestly, just adding that dust material effect from earlier would probably be cool enough. I also think it'd be interesting if dust storms could either be cold or hot. After all, the sand would blot out the sun. Maybe it chills you as well. Toxic storms could have a chance of being acid rain. That would be cool. Instead of just a vague toxic hazard, it's actual acid dropping from the sky. That would it would damage your shields and then your health if you don't take cover. Exocraft and starships, though, would be immune. So that could encourage exocraft use during acid rainstorms. Of course, it could also damage sentinels and fauna, which would be kind of interesting to see, right? You're just camping out in your ship, you just see fauna getting hit by acid rain. That'd be kind of weird, but it'd be cool to fight sentinels in that. You'd both be taking damage constantly. Lastly, we have regular rainstorms. Now, I kind of hate how we only have superheated rainstorms in the game. In my personal life, rain is usually cold, so I'd love to have both hot and cold rainstorms in No Man's Sky. It would also be cool if the ground became muddy during and shortly following a rainstorm. Essentially, it would make like a splooshier footstep sound than usual. Maybe it'd have like a slightly shinier effect.
Which the game does essentially already do, granted.
But you could also implement some effect to walk speed if you wanted to go crazy, right? Maybe stamina drains faster while running through mud. I don't know, it could be annoying, or it could be interesting. Also wouldn't apply to every rainy planet, because that would get annoying fast, since you could say that soil varies on different alien worlds. That would ensure it stays novel for longer. The last change I would make is allowing more combinations of biomes and weather. We should be able to have rainstorms on volcanic worlds. Why not? I mean, if it has oceans, it could rain there. We could have toxic storms on volcanic worlds too. Or why not have rare light showers on a desert planet? Why not have a firestorm hit a forest planet? I mean, forest fires are a part of Earth's ecosystems. The same could be true of alien worlds. We could also introduce more universal weather types, but I'll get to those soon. Also, turn down the default storm effects. I know you can lower it manually now, but by default it should be lower. Because in order to see these cool new effects and things, we need to actually be able to see. Anyway, these changes would improve visual, interactive, and combo variety. Number 15, more ocean types. Longtime fans of the channel will no doubt recognize this idea from a video I did last year about how I would improve exploration. But you know what? It was a good idea, so I'm going to reuse it here. Quick explanation is that basically the way oceans work in No Man's Sky is that there's a water table set at a specific altitude. You can think of this as sea level. All the terrain above sea level uses the land biomes, and all the terrain beneath sea level uses the underwater biomes. That's fun, that's cool, but I've always wondered why there are only water worlds in No Man's Sky and not, say, lava worlds. Essentially, you'd replace the water object, the water table, with a lava object and ignore the biome underneath, so you don't need to generate that. The lava would be opaque, it might glow slightly, and touching it would damage the player, right, eventually killing you. Since you can't swim in lava, it would essentially be replacing the water shader, adding a collider to the water table, and making it damage the player quickly. Kind of like the lava we already have in the game, but just applied as a sphere around the planet. And just like that, you have a completely different kind of planet. Completely different visuals and gameplay. Well, not too much gameplay, but you could limit it to volcanic and scorched biomes if you like too. Make it super rare though, like 1 in 20 or something. And you've got something new. They look epic from space too. You could use that same technique, but instead of lava, make it acid. Big ol' ocean of acid. Is that realistic? Maybe not, but it would be cool. Boiling tar could work too, right? The idea is to create opaque oceans that kill you on repeated contact. These would help vary both visuals and gameplay. Plus, I'm sure base builders would love to build right on top of them. What if there was liquid mercury instead of water on some planets? You could leave the underwater terrain intact, right? But remove all plants and animals. Since visibility would be 0, you don't need to see any of that. Swimming in it would be dangerous since it could easily get stuck in a cave or something and be unable to find the surface. They could hide some loot down there though for the crazy divers among you. I would love to see oceans that are frozen over on ice worlds, even if it's just the top, right? You just have to melt a hole and then you can dive in. You could even have a message say, cannot land ship on unstable ice to prevent players from parking somewhere inhospitable. It could also just be solid ice with goodies locked within, although that would require a whole new terrain and biome system, so maybe it's less practical. Another idea is to create flat deserts by replacing the water table with flat terrain. This could be salt flats or hard stone. It would create vast regions of nothingness that would essentially serve as a second biome on some planets. Of course, it would work on desert planets, but imagine a lush planet with vast deserts beyond. It could be cool. The main issue would be if a player landed in the middle of a salt flat with no resources and stranded themselves there. Granted, it would be a great lesson in scoping out your landing site ahead of time, and it would make for a good story, so maybe it would be okay. The bigger issue would actually be a player getting bored, not appreciating the contrast such a rare vista presents. Again, the key to this working is to make these non-water oceans extremely rare. We want them to feel like genuine surprises when you find them. Do all this, and visual, interactive, and combo variety would improve. Number 16. More weather events. Not to be confused with my previous points about more weather effects. These would be more difficult to implement as they would fundamentally alter the options for weather on planets. First off, let's add more storms that could apply to multiple biomes. Magnetic storms could cause aurora borealis to appear in the sky. Your compass and long-range equipment, such as location markers, could flicker or fail during these, forcing you to navigate by sight. Sentinels would also be affected. Hail is a fairly common phenomenon here on Earth. It could apply to lush, frozen, and even other biomes in No Man's Sky. Light hail would mostly be an audio-visual thing, but big hail could be a damage-dealing affair. However, due to hail's signature, bouncing effect, I could see it being too resource-intensive to actually run on consoles, especially weaker hardware. And come to think of it, I don't know if I've ever seen a game with hail in it, like actual simulated hail, so it might just be prohibitively difficult to run. If that's the case, then don't worry about it. Ashfall could be a weather type exclusive to volcanic worlds, essentially lowering visibility and clogging equipment like your jetpack or multi-tool, causing short malfunctions. Or I could even see it grounding your ship until it clears. That'd be interesting, since your engines wouldn't be able to take in air. Not that they need to, because they work in space, I suppose. Still, I think that could work. Earthquakes would be an interesting thing to see. We already have pseudo-earthquakes in the game that occur every time a Titan sandworm appears, so I wonder if they could repurpose those effects. If you turn down the screen shake and had it last a little bit longer, you could pass it off as like tremors, right? These could affect primarily volcanic worlds, but realistically they'd fit anywhere. Especially on those planets that say like core detonation imminent, it would help it feel unstable. I think it'd be cool. Fog banks would also be cool. Those foggy mornings when you can only see like 10 feet in front of you? Well, maybe not that extreme, but something like that would really change exploration, I think.
Or imagine corrosive clouds. They would damage your ship if you fly through them. Rolling fog banks on the surface could also damage you. It would need to be telegraphed to the player, but it feels like a good sci-fi danger.
Something I think would fit the space setting especially would be solar flares. Imagine you get a notification that a solar flare is incoming, T-minus 60 seconds. If it hits you, equipment fails for 10 seconds or something. If you're in space, your ship would shut off for 10 seconds. If you're flying over a planet's surface when you're hit, you'd start to lose control, and if you crash, then you have to repair your ship and take off again. Maybe your HUD and everything would shut down if you get hit, To avoid it, the player can either go underground, be on the night side of a planet, not hit by the sun, or hide behind another world or something. From a programming perspective, you could use the sunlight's raycast to check if a player is visible to the sun or not. I don't know, could be cool. I would also love to see more ocean-based weather, right? We have tornadoes in the game already, so why not slap a more opaque water texture over it and make a water spout if it goes over water? Or set it underwater and use it as the basis for a whirlpool. It'd be cool to see a bunch of fish sucked in. Plus, it'd be kind of scary if you got sucked into it while underwater, because you have to manage your air, right? It could be really disorienting. I'd love to see tsunamis and rogue waves too, but honestly, I think those would require too much programming. What about a flood though? Could you raise the water table temporarily? You could swim past trees and stuff, if you could, but as cool as that would be, it'd probably look super jank, and it would probably cause a lot of performance issues, so not really worth it. On the topic of tornadoes though, besides water spouts, dust devils would be cool to see on desert planets. These would occur not during storms, but just ambiently. Even if they're just cosmetic, right? They wouldn't push you around, they would just be these objects that move along in the distance. I think they'd give certain rare planets some extra character. That'd be a distinctive quality. Y'all let me know what sorts of weather you think they could realistically put in the game though. Solar flares might be a bit much, but dust devils and water spouts could leverage existing code and assets, right? Again, sorry Hello Games if I'm being too casual with the suggestions. I know it's easier said than done. Anywho, this suggestion would fall into visual, interactive, and combo varieties. Number 17, more hazards. Now, we're getting to the part of the show where I'm straight up just suggesting we add more content. We're a little past simple or practical at this point. I'm in dreamland, baby. So, more hazards. I think exploring new worlds should carry some chance of danger. Some planets should be safer, and others should be more dangerous. We already see this in sentinel aggression and weather intensity, but I'd like to see it in other ways too. For example, remember how I said some cactus should damage you earlier? Well, what if there were plants that were just there to poke you? Just spiky plants that are independent of biome, like spiky vines. Those could make a planet more treacherous to explore. You could have bulbs that if you step over them, they pop and release poison. Maybe there are grabby vines or patches of sticky ooze on the ground that traps you until you spam a button. Kind of spitballing here, but the idea is just more hazards to surprise you. Or what if we did pools of lava? Or acid, or tar, quicksand, something like that? Listen, I'm well aware that No Man's Sky's current tech can't put water above the water table. So I'm just talking about assets that could be spawned anywhere, that are indestructible, kind of like volcanoes, right? And prevent terrain manipulation directly around them. So it could look like this, right? It's just kind of like a fake pool, and you have the terrain around it, and you could fill that with lava or acid or what have you. If you had a planet with these, you might think twice about jetpacking blindly over every hill. While I do think these would spice things up from time to time, it's not my most developed idea. Might not be worth the development compared to the other ideas I've presented up to this point. It ticks boxes for visual, interactive, and combo variety though. Number 18, more fauna behaviors. Now this one would require a lot of coding and animation work, but it would apply to existing fauna already in the game, so no new models and no reset required. Right now, fauna are predictable. Sure, they all look different, which is great by the way, they do look different, but they act similarly. They walk around, occasionally make a sound, and then keep walking. Prey will run from predators, predators will chase, kill, and eat prey, but otherwise there isn't much to them. You can interact with them, but they feel disconnected from the environment. So let's fix that. Step 1. Let herbivores eat fruit, flowers, or whatever common resource is around. Wouldn't it be crazy if some two-legged deer ate that sodium flower you desperately needed to survive? Wouldn't it be cool to see a protogek eat a fruit off of a tree? What about those cooking ingredients scattered around planets? I mean, those are edible. It would be great to see local fauna acknowledge and interact with these things. It would help the resources feel more integrated with the world, which they desperately need to be, and it would give the fauna something interesting to do, which they also need. And since we already have the animations for like picking flowers and stuff, you could just use those. For the flower, of course, you'd have to animate the animals, and each one would have a different. Yeah, it'd be a lot of work. The second improvement is allowing them to get attacked by hazardous plants, which I think I stated earlier. Imagine if they're attracted to them, right? Since now they eat fruit, so they go up to the gas bag, they try and eat the fruit, and then bam, dead, Again, the world would feel way more alive since the ecosystem functions without your input. It's not just waiting for you to come up and feed them. They're living their lives, or not, You could even have certain large species be immune to hazardous plants and instead eat the whole hazardous plant itself. I mean, that would be cool to see. Back in the day, critters used to dig up stuff on occasion to share with you. I would love to see them dig up stuff independently, for their own good. Also, having some kind of resting cycle would go a long way. A herd of space cows resting under the trees, or maybe you boost over a hill and stumble upon a den of predators. Again, it just makes them feel more alive. You make all that happen, and visual, interactive, and combo variety go up. Number 19. Unique predators. While we're on the topic of fauna, I'd love to see more predator types. Right now, all predators just run at you and bite or slash. Whereas the acid-shooting spider, right? Biological horrors and mini-fiends already have an acid spit attack. So it would be cool to see some regular fauna with that ability as well. Maybe we could have some of the aerial creatures, like the ones in the sky, become hostile, dive bombing you from above. That'd be an interesting planet. The tunneling types of critters could prove difficult to fight too, since they're underground so often. That could be fun. In fact, some kind of stalking behavior would be cool too, but only if the player was actually made aware they were being tracked. Otherwise, it wouldn't feel any different than just being attacked normally. Additionally, we could introduce defensive capabilities for non-aggressive fauna. Maybe some fauna with shells can only be hit in certain weak points. Or maybe the ones that have quills actually damage you like a porcupine. Or maybe they have toxic skin like tree frogs, or they could even emit radiation.
Or have a stinky toxic cloud like an alien skunk defense.
I would love to see more variety and danger from strange alien biology. These additions could impact visual variety, but they'd most likely just change interactive and combo varieties. Number 20. Natural points of interest. We're in the home stretch here. Natural POIs. This is also from last year's video, but it's like my number one wish for planetary exploration, so give us points of interest that aren't buildings. I'm talking geysers, skeletons, big pits, tar pits, oases, giant trees, animal dens, alien growths, radioactive sludge, Atlantideum, I don't know, or even a pile of crystals, just to name a few. The idea is to give the player something to actually discover on planets that are never marked by any beacons or quests, so you can only find these by stumbling across them. Imagine coming over a hill and seeing a giant skeleton or a grove of infested flora. You could even just take the volcanoes from volcanic worlds and put one of those, somewhere randomly. After all, there's no reason we wouldn't see the odd volcano on non-volcanic planets. It could be a pile of large boulders, right? It could be anything really, but it should be natural. The other benefit to this is that you can add these to uncharted planets to spice them up a bit, since those currently don't have any kinds of points of interest. Each planet might have like 3 types of natural POIs. That way you still have to travel between planets to see all of them. They could also offer unique gameplay and rewards. Maybe one POI is a biological horror nest with a larger queen boss battle. Or maybe one is a den of predators with possible loot in their nest. Maybe it's a radioactive vein rich in minerals. Could just be a pillar of gold or something. Anything you'd be happy to discover in a national park, like on a hike, That'd be a good candidate for this POI. Now, I won't pretend for a second that this would be easy. It's the second to last thing on this list for a reason. It would be hard and require work from several disciplines to implement. I think it could have a big impact if done well though, but compared to some of the simpler ideas on this list, maybe it's not as practical. These would potentially improve all 4 areas of variety though. Lastly, finally, we're at number 21, underground variety. Listen y'all, I love the caves in No Man's Sky. I've done videos on the caves in No Man's Sky. It's safe to say I love the caves in No Man's Sky. That said, as a cave-loving guy, they're boring as hell most of the time. Fauna, they're rare, predators are even rarer, and rewards are always lame. So let's fix that. Firstly, let's add a bunch more crystals. Right? Back in the day, you used to find a lot of crystals in caves. And that made sense because crystals are more common underground than on the surface, like in real life. That's how mines work. So yeah, we should have more crystals underground. You can even have crystal forms of resources that aren't normally crystals on the surface, right? So they don't have to just be the generic resources that you have on the surface. It could be like deuterium crystals. Rare resources would also give folks more reason to explore underground than just escaping the weather. Secondly, we need more treasure. Maybe there's a rare chance of finding ancient bones or an ancient chest down there. Thirdly, and most difficultly, let's get some points of interest underground. They could be a mix of natural and constructed stuff. You could have nests of deadly creatures, buried ruins of lost civilizations, webs, worm burrows, giant crystals, pools of lava, right? I mean, that makes sense to have them subterranean. A special glowing fungus, or even like giant root structures. Anything you like. Another thing that might be interesting to see would be preventing players from using their scanners or analysis visors to detect things in caves from the surface. So if an object is flagged as being in a cave biome, maybe it would be excluded from scanners or analysis visors. On one hand, it might make it less likely for players to notice caves and even go looking for them. But on the other hand, you could actually be surprised by what you find down there, instead of just seeing a marker underground and digging directly to it. Also, we need more regular threats in caves. Caves are a unique biome because they have ceilings, right? That's the defining feature. So cave predators and hazardous flora should take advantage of that unique aspect. Hazardous plants could drop acid from above, right? So instead of looking down for things, which is normally what players do, looking down for resources, it'd be easy to be surprised by something above you, right? Cave spiders could trap you in a web or come down from the ceiling, which might be kind of spooky. In fact, imagine more bug-based fauna in general down there. It's actually kind of a scary thought, but yeah, that's what I would love to see from caves. So that would affect all 4 kinds of variety too, if implemented correctly. And that's the last item on my list. Holy cow. So let's look over it for a second. As you can see, most suggestions deal with combo variety, right? I've tried to suggest things that could be combined with other elements and not just static or stuck to one biome or scenario. And then we have a good mix of both visual and interactive variety. What you don't see a lot of here, though, is reward variety. I didn't touch on that too much, which is unfortunate, as I think rewards are some of the best extrinsic motivations to get players to explore outside of their comfort zone. But such rewards often require careful balancing, so y'all let me know in the comments what kinds of rewards and how you'd implement them. Besides that though, what do you think of the list? Do these ideas seem like they would improve the game, or do you think they'd make it worse? Do they seem realistic or practical, or maybe a little far-fetched? Which idea would you like to see implemented first, and what kinds of ideas would you come up with? I want to see your ideas in the comments below. I try to avoid just saying, add more procedural parts, but some of my ideas did veer in that direction. I love No Man's Sky. I think it's a great game in a great state, multiplayer stability aside, and I hope it only gets better from here, and I think it will. Whew. Anyways, my voice is definitely going out. This video took weeks to put together, I can't believe it's over an hour long. Hopefully the audio is not corrupted. Can you believe that this was originally meant to be the second half of my variation quantified video? Man, that would have been a long video if I kept this all together. Anyway, I need to sleep or hug my wife or something, so please consider liking the video and subscribing if you appreciate the effort. Or if you want to support more deep dive video game content, or if you just want to wish me a happy birthday, belated birthday.
Very belated at this point.
Yeah, I'm milking that for all it's worth. You only turn 30 once. Yeah. And if you want additional perks while supporting me directly, you can also become a valued member of the channel. I would really appreciate it, but no pressure. Regardless, thanks for watching this far. You're a real one. Should I put one of those things where it's like, if you watch this far in the video, make sure you put deuterium in your comments so I know you watched the whole thing. I had a hard time spelling deuterium while writing this script, so that might be a difficult one. But anyways, I have no idea when the next video is coming. I still have my hour-long Assassin's Creed video that I recorded back in December that I haven't finished editing, so I have no idea when the next video is coming. Feel free to check out some of my other stuff in the meantime, though. I have plenty of great content that, if you enjoyed this, you might enjoy as well. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!